The darkness continues.
Peace, folk, and welcome back to another edition of the Prophet of Thought series right here on the old T.P.O.T YouTube page. I'm your host, X, of course, but you knew that already. That's why your black asses are here. Well, I'm back. And today I wanted to do a quick one talking about the University of Virginia players who were slain on the bus on the way back from a field trip. And those brothers' names, and you can see them on this moniker here. From left to right is Brother Deshaun Perry, Brother Devin Chandler, and Brother Lavel Davis Jr. I thought it was important to talk about it because when these things happen to black men, no one seems to care unless the bullet came from a white person's gun, a white policeman's gun. No one cares. But that wasn't the case the other day, because it was another brother who gunned these young men down, these young football players down. And no one cares about it, man. They don't. There'll be no marches. There'll be no protests. There'll be no call to arms. There'll be no Ben Crump or Jesse Jackson or these other people who cry racism about everything. There will be none of that. And we know it. And we know why. But I thought it was important to talk about it. And I figured I would edit in some of Brother Delano Squires' talking points as well, because I thought he broke it down magnificently. So you'll hear from him as well. Shout out to Brother Delano Squires. He's down with Jason Whitlock, and the brother is very intelligent, man. He has great insight. So I just had to put him in this. So let's get ready to listen to some of this. And as always, fair use, Negroes. Fair use. Let's get at it. This is Brother Delano Squires, so let's get at it. Fair use, Negroes. Fair use.
What they'll do, to your point, if the shooter is white and the victims are black, they'll play up the racial angle regardless of what the actual circumstances are.
Exactly.
If the shooter is not white, let's say the shooter is black, an instance like this, if the people involved, if the victims are not famous, right? If they don't lend themselves to a specific network's demographics, then you won't hear about that case at all. At all. The only reason we're talking about it today is because these are three football players. If this was just, three guys who lived in Hampton, Virginia or Charlottesville, and they were three black guys who got shot on the same night, this wouldn't even be a story. That's not even a story of Baltimore or Philadelphia. And if forced to say something, the usual suspects will say, okay, I can't go to race angle because...
Yep, can't go to race angle because there's no other race of people involved.
There's no white guy here. All right, I can't go the sexism angle because...
There's no females involved here.
Because there's not a woman victim. So there's always a third angle, which is tried and true, it's a reliable backstop like Pudge Rodriguez, and that's the gun angle.
Yep. It's always going to be about the guns. It's never about the people who wield the guns and murder folk. It's always about the guns. It's not about how a person was brought up. It's not about a person's mental condition. It's not about the society ills that make it possible. It's not about the devaluing of other black folks' lives. Nope. It's all the gun's fault why this person has this gun and murders folk. But we continue. Fair use, Negroes. Fair use.
So they'll say, I'm tired of the thoughts and prayers. F you, NRA, and we need to do something about gun violence. And then that'll be it. They'll give that obligatory tweet, that obligatory statement, and then they'll move on to something that is more interesting to them. And that'll probably be the last that you hear of that particular case.
He's right. You're not going to hear that much about this case. You know, you'll hear about it here and there, you know, because it's fresh. You know, it just happened the other day. But this will work its way out of the news cycle quickly. We probably won't even be talking about it in another week or two. And we definitely won't remember none of these brothers' names at all. We'll be more familiar with the person who killed them. We'll know his name more so than we'll know their names. But notice, I never told you his name because he won't get any visibility here. He's not important. He doesn't matter. Those young men he killed, those 3 young, promising college student / football players, their lives matter here. His does not. But we continue. Fair use, Negroes. Fair use.
The most influential people in the black community, the aristocracy, the 5 Ps, the politicians, the pundits, the professors, the preachers, and the performers, don't lead black folk because they never tell us that we have to correct or do anything.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Isn't that the way it always is? Black people don't have to change anything. All we have to do is get white folk to accept us. We can stay the same. We're allowed to be this way because we're black. We're allowed to tear up our own cities and kill each other and shoot little kids. But we don't have to change any of this. We just need other people to accept it. Absurd. But we continue. Fair use, Negroes. Fair use.
The people who we think of as black leaders are really white leaders because they spend all of their time trying to correct the behavior and the thoughts and the actions of white people.
Yep. We need to fix white folk. We need to make them less racist. We need to make them less bigoted, less discriminatory. Forget what we're doing. All we have to do is make white people less racist, and all would be fine. But we continue. Fair use, Negroes. Fair use.
So in this, Jason, you know this, you know, as a college athlete, when your coach came or your position coach came, they coached you. They didn't coach your opponent. They told you what you had to clean up. They said, no, you got to turn that foot in. You got to strike the defensive lineman in his chest in this particular position. And that's how you know you were getting coached. But if you came into film session and your coach just spent 25 minutes on some other player and they never addressed anything that you had to clean up, then you would say, well, this guy's he's not concerned with my growth or development. He's leading somebody else. And that's what we have in the black community today.
Yep, that's exactly what we got. I'll say again, we are trying to get white people to accept our black asses. We are trying to convince white people that they are too racist for black people. We're trying to convince white folk that if they just accept us, we'll be better. We'll do better. We'll have more. We'll be able to do more. But you old bigoted, racist white people are stopping us. That is why we can't get our lives together. That is why we're killing each other. That is why we're shooting kids in the park and in the playground. It's all because of you white people. That is why. But we continue. Fair use, Negroes. God damn it, fair use.
So none of these people ever has anything to say about anything that we, black folk, need to do to improve the conditions in our own families and communities.
But Brother Delano, you know they cannot say that because number one, it would cause them to lose money. Number two, it would cause them to lose support. There's not a lot of money for most people, especially when you're talking about the black pundits and the black academics and these black college professors and all these people who get on here and talk all this oppression and how oppressed black people are, why they themselves sit back and make millions of dollars. There's no money in it for them because if they start telling the truth, people will accuse them of number one, bashing, and number two, being negative, which I think is ridiculous because for the life of me, I cannot figure out how the truth is somehow considered negative. But we continue. Fair use, Negroes. Fair use.
All of their commentary is geared towards white people. White people must buy these books, listen to these podcasts, live in these neighborhoods, go to these schools, post these messages. And that's all it is, over and over again. And I think that had been simmering under the surface for a while, but George Floyd's death brought that all the way to the surface. That is the true white superiority complex.
Yep. That's the true white superiority complex. By always focusing on what the hell white people are doing. These people will have you believe that white people wake up every morning saying to themselves, let me go find some black folk to be supreme over. As if white people are just sitting at their dinner table every night discussing black folks. It's the stupidest of thing, man. And a lot of us believe it. We believe that white folks are so concerned with our black asses. They have nothing better to think about except us black people. That's what every damn white person in America is doing. Sitting at their damn table, thinking about black folks. Not paying their mortgage, not taking care of their children, not paying their bills, keeping the lights on, keeping food on the table, keeping their car note paid. Nope. All they doing is thinking about black people. But we continue. Fair use, Negroes. Fair use.
If the white man does it, it is very important. If he says a crossword, it's very important. If he says the same words that you, Mr. Black Man, say, it's very important. But when you say something, right, when you degrade a black woman, when you promote violence against black men, it's not nearly as important. And that's why Don Imus got run off the air and Snoop Dogg gets to smoke reefer with Martha Stewart. So this is where we are, you know, as a community. The black homicide victimization rate is 7 times higher than that of whites.
But wait a minute, Brother Delano. Doesn't that kill the narrative of white people do it too? But we continue. Fair use, Negroes. Fair use.
I said this to people multiple times on Twitter. I've posted the links to the data and the graphs. You literally cannot graph the two on the same chart. For whites, their graph on the y-axis tops out at about 20. For us, ours starts after 0, starts at about 50. So you can't graph the two on the same. And you pulled out the number in terms of overall leading cause of death for black males. So that's from like 1 to whatever the age is, right? But when you look at those smaller age breakdowns, and CDC used to have it broken up really finely. Now they do from like 1 to 19, and I think they do from, maybe 20 to 44, something to that effect. It's the leading cause of death in both of those two groups. For that first group, I think it's like 35%. For the second group, it's about 24%. But Jason, even that doesn't really capture the picture, because I've done the data, I've gone into the actual report. When you go from 15 to 24 of the black males in that age category who die, obviously tragically, 50% of them die by homicide.
50% of black men between the ages of 15 and 24 died by homicide. Just let that swirl around in your mind for a little while. 50%. That means that one out of 2 black men, or black young men, I should say, that have died, and it's probably in the inner cities. I'm pretty sure he's talking about inner city data, because that seems to be where Negroes are the most foolish. 1 out of 2 black men that die by homicide. Or you can take it up a little bit. You can go 2 out of 4. You can go 3 out of 6, 5 out of 10, 10 out of 20, 50 out of 100. However you want to break it down for it to make sense to you. But 50% of the black young men who die between the age of 15 and 24 die by way of homicide. But we continue. Fair use, Negroes. Fair use.
And this tracks with what all of us, if you've grown up within 65 miles of a city, you understand this. And I can name them. From New York down to Charlotte, to Miami, to Atlanta, to Cleveland, to New Orleans, to Chicago, to St. Louis, to Baltimore, to Philly, to Compton. All of those cities in which there's some significant black population, every one of us is going to know, many of us know people personally who've been killed.
He's right. He's right. We know people who have been murdered, especially if we live in one of these ridiculous cities. And if we don't know someone personally who has been murdered, we know somebody that knows somebody else that has been murdered. But we don't like to talk about that, Brother Delano, do we? But we continue. Fair use, Negroes, fair use.
Right? And all of us know the crime stats in those cities. So even if your city, and I grew up in New York City where, you got relatively equal sort of population groups, relatively speaking, but more equal in most cities, white, black, Asian, Hispanic. In New York City, 96% of the homicide victims are black and Hispanic.
96% of the homicide victims are black and Hispanic in New York City. And let me tell you something. He's right. I know. I'm from New York. And out of that 96% of homicide victims that are black and Latino, I guarantee you it's 50-50 out of that 96%, if not greater, that are young black men. I don't know the specifics of that, but I'm pretty sure at least 50%, if not more, out of that 96% is young black men. But we continue. Fair use, Negroes. Fair use.
Now, the problem is that that would be a cause for national outrage if it wasn't also the case that 90+% of the perpetrators are black and Hispanic. And when you are a community that roots your identity in the notion of being oppressed, then you see yourself in the person who's a victim of a racist criminal justice system, and not and you don't see yourself in the person who's the victim of violent crime. And that's why the BLMs and the Sharptons and all the other, the usual suspects in the media will step over dead bodies in their own neighborhoods. Because some of these people are from Detroit, they're from Philly, they're from DC. They'll step over those bodies to go find a guy in Sheboygan somewhere, right? Some place they never heard of. And they say, oh, wow, this guy was shot by a police officer. This guy was killed by a vigilante.
He's right on that, too. He's right on that. We will totally ignore the dozens of brothers who are murdered, gunned down in the street by the dozens in places like St. Louis, Baltimore, Memphis, all right, Detroit. We will totally disregard those dozens of brothers who get murdered on a regular basis to point out somebody who got shot by a police officer. Now, I know people will say, well, they're the police. They're supposed to protect and serve. They're not supposed to be killing us. You can't compare that to us. They're the police. And fine, I will give people that argument. But these are also the very same people who will sit and say they will get on the internet and television and everywhere else and talk about how the police are trained to get out and kill black folk. This is all white police think about, being able to kill some black person. That's what white cops do all day long. Just ride around and look for black folk to kill. People will even take it all the way back to the slavery time and tell you how the police, that's how they began. They were around to round up slaves and rustle up the runaway slaves. And so if you're saying that, why are you so outraged when they kill a black person? Because according to you, this is what they do. According to you, this is what they do. So is it unexpected that they do what you claim they are trained and paid and chartered and contracted to do? That being the case, shouldn't we be more outraged when one of us does it to one of us? Because we're not supposed to be trained and contracted and chartered to do that to each other, right? That should outrage us anymore. Fine, you're outraged when this racist, bigoted police officer kills somebody. But shouldn't we be more outraged when one of us kills somebody that looks like us? Shouldn't that be more unexpected as opposed to the racist white police industry doing it? Because after all, according to a lot of these people, this is what police do, right? But we continue. Fair use, Negroes. Fair use.
That's really important news. And that's why, Jason, when I would go on the Root, the Griot, and Black News Channel for the short period of time it was up, I couldn't find any crime story from any major city, no matter how horrific, and it didn't matter if it was a toddler who got shot in the chest or a 7-year-old in a McDonald's drive-through, Jaslyn Adams in Chicago, the Devell Crawford, I think, in Devell Gardner in New York City, a month after the Amy Cooper thing, the quote unquote Karen bird watcher who harassed the black dude.
Now, isn't that something? He makes another good point. Because I remember that story that he's talking about. The white woman in the park, you know, she called the police on the brother. He was out there bird watching and she called the police. And, you know, I mean, it's just another crazy white woman out there doing something to somebody because they're black. I get it. But that was around the same time. The little fella, who wasn't even a year old yet, I think he was about, I don't know, almost a year old, was murdered in Brooklyn sitting in his stroller. And I bet you most of you probably never knew what his name was until now. But you knew who that white lady was, didn't you? We know who all the quote-unquote Karens are. I find it amazing that we think it's a bigger news story when some old spinster white woman says something to somebody black, even if they go as far as calling them a nigger in Kmart or a nigger at Target. We think that's more important than a young infant being murdered, or a 5-year-old being murdered, or a 7-year-old being murdered. We think that some quote-unquote Karen calling somebody a nigger at Burger King, we think that's bigger news than a 5-year-old being murdered in the playground, being murdered in the park, being shot in the head in front of their house. That's not a problem. The white woman calling a black person a nigger or a monkey or an ape. Oh God, we gotta protest. We gotta march. We gotta be outraged. But that baby being killed in the park, just another day. But we continue. Fair use, Negroes. Fair use.
The dog walker who harassed the black bird watcher, that got national media coverage. The 11-month-old boy gets shot in the chest in a stroller in Brooklyn. Barely local coverage. So we don't see ourselves as victims of violent crime. For us, it's always about the system, and it's always about white supremacy, white supremacy, white supremacy.
But that's all. I mean, when it comes to these types of things, man, and once again, man, shout out to Brother Delano, man. I mean, he broke this down brilliantly, man. These type of things, man, no one really gives a damn about these types of things, man. You know, I mean, it's always about trying to fix white folk. We need to repair white folk. That's what it's always about, man. Regardless of how many of us kill each other, regardless of how many of us die, regardless of how many children get shot, it's always about fixing the others. And it's crazy, man. It's insane, and nothing's ever going to get fixed, man, until we start focusing on fixing what's going on with us first. I mean, rest in peace, man, to those 3 young men. They died senselessly for nothing. And, you know, I want to thank y'all, man, for coming through, man. You know, you could have spent your time anywhere. You decided to spend it here, and it's appreciated, man. I don't take your good folk lightly, man. I never have and I never will. You got my word on that. So, with that, I will leave you good folk with 3 words, you know, like I always do. Open your mind. Peace, folk. X with another. X.
The darkness continues.
Only from T.P.O.T Media. Open your minds.